March 11, 2011 began with one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. Along Japan's northeastern coast, buildings shook violently as the ground moved beneath them. At the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, the reactors automatically shut down as designed, but the danger was only beginning. Minutes later, a massive tsunami crashed into the coastline, overwhelming the plant and flooding critical equipment. Electricity disappeared. Emergency systems began to fail. Without enough power to cool the reactors, temperatures inside the plant started rising. What followed would become one of the most serious nuclear disasters in modern history. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant stood on Japan's northeastern coast along the Pacific Ocean. The facility contained 6 boiling water reactors, although only Units 1, 2, and 3 were operating when the earthquake struck. Units 4, 5, and 6 were already shut down for maintenance or inspection. At 2:46 p.m. local time on March 11, 2011, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck beneath the Pacific Ocean. The shaking was enormous, but the reactors that were operating responded as designed. The control rods were inserted automatically, stopping the nuclear fission chain reaction inside Units 1, 2, and 3. However, shutting down a nuclear reactor does not mean that it immediately becomes cold. Even after the chain reaction stops, the radioactive fuel continues producing significant residual heat. That heat must be removed continuously, requiring powerful cooling systems and a reliable supply of electricity. The earthquake had damaged the external power supply to the plant. Emergency diesel generators automatically started, providing electricity for essential cooling equipment. For a brief period, the emergency systems appeared to be functioning. Then, the tsunami arrived. The earthquake had generated a massive series of waves across the Pacific. At Fukushima, the seawall and other protective measures were overwhelmed by waves much higher than the plant had been designed to withstand. Water flooded the site and reached critical electrical equipment, including emergency diesel generators and batteries. Several generators stopped operating. Electrical distribution systems were damaged. The plant lost much of its ability to power pumps and monitoring equipment. This was the beginning of the station blackout. Inside the reactors, the fuel continued generating heat, while operators struggled to restore cooling. Without normal electrical power, they had to rely on limited emergency systems and battery-powered equipment. Conditions inside the reactor buildings became increasingly difficult to monitor. Unit 1 was among the first to experience a severe loss of cooling. As water levels dropped, portions of the fuel became exposed. The temperature inside the reactor pressure vessel increased dramatically, causing severe damage to the fuel. Another problem was developing. At extremely high temperatures, the zirconium alloy used in the fuel cladding can react with steam and produce hydrogen gas. Hydrogen accumulated inside the reactor building. Operators and emergency crews attempted to control pressure by venting steam and gases from the containment system. The process was extremely difficult because many valves and instruments depended on electrical power that was no longer available. As the crisis continued, the Japanese government ordered evacuations around the plant. Thousands of residents were told to leave their homes as authorities attempted to create a safety zone around the damaged facility. On March 12th, a hydrogen explosion occurred at Unit 1. A powerful blast tore through the upper portion of the reactor building, sending debris into the air and damaging the structure. The explosion did not mean that the nuclear reactor itself had exploded. Instead, accumulated hydrogen gas had ignited inside the building. The situation at Unit 3 also deteriorated. Cooling remained difficult, and hydrogen accumulated there as well. On March 14th, another massive hydrogen explosion destroyed much of the upper structure of the Unit 3 reactor building. At Unit 2, operators faced another serious emergency as cooling systems struggled and the reactor core suffered severe damage. The plant's remaining systems were pushed to their limits while workers tried to inject water and stabilize the reactors. Meanwhile, spent fuel pools inside the facility also required attention. These pools stored used nuclear fuel that continued to generate heat, making water levels and cooling conditions important concerns during the emergency. Helicopters, fire engines, pumps, and temporary power equipment were brought in as authorities searched for ways to deliver water and restore cooling. Workers operated under dangerous and rapidly changing conditions, often with incomplete information about what was happening inside the reactors. By March 15th, explosions and damage had affected multiple reactor buildings. Radioactive material had been released into the surrounding environment, and the evacuation zone had expanded. The disaster had now developed into a complex nuclear emergency involving multiple reactors at the same site. Unlike a sudden mechanical failure, Fukushima was the result of several layers of vulnerability interacting with one another. The earthquake disrupted external power. The tsunami disabled backup systems. Loss of electricity made cooling and monitoring increasingly difficult. As temperatures rose, the reactor cores suffered severe damage, while hydrogen generated during the accident caused explosions that further complicated the response. What began with an earthquake thousands of kilometers beneath the Pacific had become a nuclear crisis that would continue for weeks, months, and ultimately years. The Fukushima Daiichi disaster became a powerful reminder that nuclear safety depends on more than the reactor itself. The earthquake was extraordinarily powerful, but the tsunami exposed weaknesses that allowed critical backup systems to fail simultaneously. 3 reactor cores suffered severe damage, hydrogen explosions destroyed several reactor buildings, and large areas around the plant were evacuated. The disaster led Japan and countries around the world to reassess nuclear safety standards, emergency planning, backup power systems, and protection against extreme natural events. Thousands of workers continued difficult cleanup and stabilization efforts long after the explosions had ended. Fukushima also demonstrated how quickly a natural disaster can become a technological crisis when multiple safety barriers are overwhelmed. Its legacy remains a warning that systems designed for the worst possible scenario must be prepared for events even beyond previous expectations.